Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having me. My name is Colin Keogh, and I am a researcher and engineer. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about mass distributed manufacturing and community led responses for COVID-19. So, as I said, my background is in engineering. I am an engineer, mechanical engineer by training. I did a degree in mechanical engineering, a master's in energy systems, and then most recently a PhD in engineering innovation, and have been applying that in a range of different roles and capacities over the last couple of years. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the future is, in my opinion, going to be distributed. So, this to me is going to be the production facilities of the future: 3D printers, digitized creation systems, online or digitized automated generation of CAD models and design models that will be printed out locally, quickly, and by anybody in very kind of small, customized scales to suit and solve specific problems that people have around the world. So, in order to facilitate this, we need new innovative ideas and processes. So that's what my PhD research was looking at innovation processes. I'm sure you're all familiar with ideas like the Nesta spiral or design thinking or end-to-end innovation processes. These processes help people that are unfamiliar with the innovation journey to create, and it gives them a plan to follow to allow them to embark on these innovation practices and principles. It's led to the generation of my own model, which, as you can see there on the bottom left, the double helix innovation method. And I've been using these methods both naturally and by design for about the last 10 years or so on a range of different projects and innovations. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, traditional manufacturing strategies are highly distributed and, with an awful lot of travel. So traditional manufacturing relies on high global flows of goods due to centralized manufacturing and global trade. So an awful lot of manufacturing in Asia with transfer to the rest of the developing world and the developed world. It relies on economies of scale and global competition, which leads to the production of standardized products, standard variations of products due to these desires to get to economies of scale. And it unfortunately results in very high levels of pollution and waste generated, both environmental, energy, emissive waste, all resulting from the transport of these goods around the world. So, a huge amount of goods move around the world daily, and all we need is slowdowns with COVID-19 or ships blocking the Suez Canal to see the impact that any sort of reduction in this global trade can have on the world at large. A distributed manufacturing strategy, though, is different, as in it reduces global transport and therefore global pollution. And what it does is it decentralized production, meets the demands of local needs and for customized products. It allows the development of regional and small scale economic cycles. So, versus manufacturing everything you need in Asia and shipping it to the rest of the world, you can set up centralized manufacturing sites, but then you also set up distributed manufacturing sites which serve local economies. So I'm on the island of Ireland now. A distributed manufacturing site there could solve all of the needs of the Irish market and then not require as much transport or import of goods and materials from other regions. So 3D printing is one of the main tools and methods how I believe this is going to be unlocked in the future, and is already quite ubiquitous in a number of different fields. So, healthcare in particular with implants, medical grade implants. This is a hip implant or a pelvis implant. An awful lot of these materials are currently 3D printed using high-end metal-based 3D printing processes. And I believe it's going to become more and more common. So, it will distribute down from the high-end levels of aerospace and medical, and it will distribute down to our everyday goods and consumer products that we'll buy that will be manufactured locally in a customized manner for us to use in our daily lives. So, traditionally 3D printers were large scale industrial machines. So this is an example of a metal 3D printer here. Large scale industrial quality needs trained operators in industrial spaces to use. They produce goods and services. They produce highly complicated high-end products like these implant sockets for artificial hips, titanium, silicon carbide composites, high-end metallic composites producing these highly complex and therefore very expensive medical implantable goods. But 3D printing has circulated down to the consumer market. So, a couple of €100, let's say, will buy you an Ultimaker 3D printer, Now, while you don't have the capacity of an industrial machine, you do have a significantly large percentage of it. So if you change the design parameters, you change the design goals, you can do a whole host of new different things with technologies like this. So, you know what I mean? A quick search I did the other day gave you 3D printers as cheap as €80, you know. So for a couple of €100, you can have 3D printer systems that can do a huge amount with new, once you apply them in a new innovative way. So an example would be this. I'm sure people have seen it before, the 3D printed brace. So, you know, arm brace or arm cast, you know, as you can see, fulfills the standard function of an arm cast to, you know, support a bone in your arm when it's broken. But as you can see, it's hollow, so it's lighter weight. It's optimized, so it uses less material. And then the hollow sections also then allow air to circulate and reduces one of the biggest problems patients face with these casts, which is itches or like, you know, cleaning of the arm underneath the cast. So, you know, a little tweak in how you design unlocked new potential for 3D printers in this specific space. Another example would be surgical tools. I've worked on projects like these before. Surgical tools, we have them in the West, of course, you know, we don't give them a second thought, but in developing regions, these tools can be expensive. An awful lot of times they're single use. So, you know, getting access to them can be quite challenging. Whereas you can 3D print them. You can 3D print replica versions that work just as well, that can be used once off, and then once they're finished, they can be recycled and turned into new 3D printed material. So again, a slight little change in what you do, unlocking new opportunities. Similarly, a stethoscope, you know, a traditional medical stethoscope versus a 3D printed one made from a number of 3D printed parts and some flexible tubing. It works just as well. It works on exactly the same principle. It can just be produced cheaply, quickly, and locally in this kind of localized production cycle. And something I have an awful lot of history in are these low-cost prosthetic hands. So these are enable hands, you know, for a handful of euros or pounds or dollars, wherever you are in the world, you can produce a kind of 75% of the way to a standardized medical prosthetic hand, but you can produce it for a handful of euros in a matter of hours anywhere in the world. So I've been lucky enough to produce a large number of these around the world so far, and I think they're amazing. They work extremely well. They're very, very simple. And then if you break a part or a component, you just make another one. Once you have access to a printer, you can have an unlimited amount of parts you need depending on material supply. 3D printed as well is becoming super common. You know, Invisalign insertable braces are one of the world's, I think it's the world's most 3D printed parts. They're all manufactured, they're all custom fit, and they're all delivered directly to your home. So replicating this model opens up a huge range of new possibilities for us in manufacturing, in goods beyond small niche consumer goods. And, you know, in the future, we could be manufacturing made to measure components in any area, in any sector, in any field. So that's exactly what I did a few years ago. And I set up a foundation called the Rapid Foundation. And our goal was to put technology in the hands of the people who need it most. So the position I was in, I was working in a university research lab, and we had an overabundance of 3D printers. You know, we had so many that we didn't know what to do with them. And anyone that's used printers before know these machines have to run and run regularly to stay in kind of functional condition. And we just didn't have enough cause for them to be running as often as we'd like. So me and a colleague of mine decided to say, look, there has to be a better use for these. So we'd approached all of the NGOs in Ireland at the time and asked them what were they doing in the 3D printer space. And the answer was they didn't even know what 3D printing was. So instead of trying to educate them on what it was, we set up our own organization called the Rapid Foundation. Me and Shane Keaveney, the two of us together, set it up. And we set it up on the idea that the use of technology is going to be important in the future. You know, 14% of jobs can be automated in the future, with 32% likely to change. And many adults around the world do not have even basic ICT skills. So how are these people meant to compete in this new digitized manufacturable world? So we set up our foundation to try and teach them these skills and also give them the ability to produce objects and requirements that they actually need in the future. So we did exactly that. So we did it via a number of field trials. These are images from one of our first field trials in an orphanage in India, where both the staff and the kids that lived in the orphanage embraced the technology and kind of just like ran with it with both hands. Like, you know, they produced cultural assets like the Taj Mahal. They produced maps of India for education. They produced low end kind of like, you know, simple medical devices and tools and equipment. They embraced it, they loved it, and they also learned while meeting the skills and requirements that they need day to day. This is a similar project we ran in Kenya, in a lovely coastal region called Watamu in Kenya. And this was to do with recycling plastic waste collected from the beach. There was lots of plastic waste on this lovely beach. They needed something to do with it. So we helped them set up micro scale waste processing facilities where they were investigating turning the collected waste into 3D printable material that they could then use to make assets that they could sell locally and support their local economy and community. And then we do the same in kind of developed world too, going to shows and fairs and university events and technology events, showing people what you can do with these 3D printing systems when you come at it from this humanitarian kind of mindset. And it's kind of worked so far, as in we've worked in a number of countries around the world, from an awful lot of it in East Africa, and then an awful lot of it in India and Asia as well, was our kind of main focus areas. And you can do a whole host of different things. You can create complex cellular models to teach complex scientific concepts to kids around the world, things you need to see visually to understand properly. We've embarked on limb scanning. So, we conducted 3D limb scanning of people that needed higher end custom fit prosthesis and orthosis. So we were able to scan their limb relatively cheaply and quickly and send off the limb scan for custom fitting of the prosthesis to reduce the amount of travel required from the person. And then, as I said, fitting these prosthetic hands, these are some of the best projects I've ever worked on. We had such an impact on people's lives. You can, in the space of a couple of hours, you can drastically change somebody's life by giving them, 20 euros worth of plastic with some engineering design on it that can revolutionize somebody's day-to-day activity. So these things are possible, and they've been kind of done before. So working away and working around, I don't need to tell anyone, along came COVID-19 and it unearthed the world. And it kind of upset everything. I was working as an engineer at the time in a university, but based on the experiences I just told you, I was quite familiar with responding to these emergency scenarios. So, I had some, let's say, social collateral in that space. So I'd found a great project on Facebook that was looking at building open source ventilators called Open Source Medical Supplies. So I joined that group, asked them, could I help promote it? And it did. It kind of went semi-viral at the time. We got thousands of people involved. And in doing so, I unearthed maybe 20 people here in Ireland that said, look, this is a great project. Let's create our own one in Ireland so we could work an awful lot quicker. Open Source Medical Supplies was based in California. So we then created a kind of a sister project that emerged from that, based in Ireland, called Open Source Ventilator at the beginning. And it kind of took off. So, there was a friend of mine called Colin Keogh, runs an IoT company here in Dublin, had asked, what is the status of ventilators in Ireland? Do we need to start building some? Literally the day after I'd set up our Open Source Ventilator project. And then, via a handy WhatsApp group, in the space of 10 minutes, we'd set up an organization, and that then became known as Team OSV. So over the space of we operated for about 6 months. Over the course of about 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks, we had 6,063 people sign up from 155 countries, which resulted in just under 4,000 members on our developmental Slack channels that generated just under 100,000 messages. So people, volunteers, doctors, healthcare workers, engineers, general members of the public all came together to try and do something to fight COVID-19. So we had huge geographical spread covering most of the world. And what amounted from that is we had 2 concurrent project lines. The first one was our ventilator project, which managed to create 14 functional ventilator concepts with teams spread all around the world. Of those 14, 2 of them went to kind of end stage medical testing. And thankfully, these ventilators were never called for. They were never needed. And so, we were able to rapidly develop potential solutions that would be there if they ever were needed, to account for regulations and safety requirements at the same time. So it showed you can create these very medically complicated devices and designs in a simple, iterative manner very, very quickly. We had another channel as well called OSVX, and that was looking at everything that was needed but wasn't a ventilator. So things like face shields, face masks, biohazard suits, disposable eye shields, educational content. there was a load of volunteers worked on great projects like that. So, calls for protective PPE and equipment to help supply healthcare workers and nursing homes, question documents dealing with, issues that were very controversial at the time, like mask wearing and how you should wear them and common mistakes, educational guidance in a number of different languages to show people simply how to stay safe while using this equipment, and then lots of kind of hardware that was developed as well, like face shields and goggles and glasses. We had a third angle of our project called Bravo Charlie Tango, which was a biker group. And this biker group were basically distributing PPE. They managed to set up a platform that was able to source, collect, and deliver necessary PPE to healthcare workers all over our country. They did hundreds of deliveries. They started manufacturing emergency medical gowns themselves. So, 3 separate facets: ventilators, other medical equipment, and then the delivery of said kind of PPE also stemmed from this project, and the guys did amazing work in that. All of this was then collated on our website, which provided as much information as we possibly could in an open manner. We were one of the most open projects. We were all non-profit. We turned down hundreds of thousands in funding. We decided we wanted to be open with everything we did, and it was hosted on our website and our GitLab, so everyone could have access to it as we were developing these sorts of solutions. And we weren't alone. So, Joseph Prussia from the Prussia printers produced thousands of emergency face shields in the Czech Republic. These guys were quite famous during the height of the pandemic in Italy for 3D printing, splitter valves for ventilators in Italy. There was talk of them being sued for, copyright and that sort of stuff. So it raised an awful lot of interesting issues. There were groups like this one that ranked the development of global ventilator projects to show who you should work with, how open they were, how much support is there, how much testing was been done. So it helped guide the development of the progress going forward. And all of this was done via this open innovation kind of crowdsourcing idea. We opened up our project to the world, and people came in volunteering and helping us to create these innovations and solutions kind of going forward. So like, if anything, it was kind of like a hackathon, whereas we brought a group of random people together. They worked away creating these solutions. We tested and validated them, and the best solutions went forward for testing and development. At the same time, we also got involved in a big European Union project called EU versus Virus, which was the world's largest hackathon at that stage. I think it still is. There was over 22 people registrations. 22,000 people registered. It created 2,000 projects. There were hundreds of different partners in, I think, 50 different nationalities, covering the whole of the European Union and 23 different languages. So, rapid innovation and design became very much in demand, and anyone with skills and experience in that field were then leading these projects to delivery. So similar projects came from MIT in the US. And that's kind of my wheelhouse. That's what I've done with my company, my innovation company, Sapien Innovation. So again, as I said, we had some experience in that area and field, so we were able to adapt to it. Now, normally we'd run workshops, innovation workshops like this in person, lots of people run over the course of a week, in this hackathon-based format to show people what could be done and what the potential was for this sort of rapid innovation. So large people, very iterative, very fast paced, very engaging, lots of sketches, lots of ideas, lots of movement. So had some experience in this field. So it kind of left me well suited to develop it going forward. As you can see, these are innovation workshops. They're not people sitting in a design suite. They're not a group of business people in suits working out business plans. These are interesting. These are exciting. These are engaging kind of projects that people like to do and enjoy the process when they're actually doing them. So these are hugely innovative and hugely iterative, and I would encourage anyone to take part in them and join them and start your own. But I would give you a couple of early warnings. There are some problems involved. One of them is morality. You have to make sure you have high moral standards, you know what you're doing, and you account for ethics going forward. With our ventilator project, we could not release anything that had any risk of hurting anyone. So we held back on an awful lot of things that were not ready for release, solely to keep people safe. So you need to have high moral fiber and an understanding of whether you should do something versus whether you actually do something. Similarly, legislation, you can fall foul of patents or IP or medical regulation. You have to account for all of these things. Even if it's an emergency situation, you still have to cover them. our ventilator project, healthcare and safety was the highest priority. So we had to follow these regulations to a T. Funding is also complicated. You have no business structure. You have no organizational structure. There's no hierarchy. If you need funding, how do you raise it? And something that caught an awful lot of emergency projects during COVID was, if you do raise a significant amount of money and you can't deliver what you've promised, what do you do with that money? How do you give it back? You can't take it. You can't spend it on something else. You have to be able to give it back to people, because you didn't do what you told them you would do with their money. And then, as I said, like similar like to legislation is regulation. Any medical device is highly regulated for a reason, for patient safety. So you need to follow it. You need to keep, a regulatory check. You have to complete these projects in the same way a medical device company would. It's for safety, it's for regulation, it's for like litigation. You have to do it. There's no way around it, even in an emergency. So that was a quick kind of whistle stop overview of mass distributed manufacturing and how you can potentially use it for emergency community-led responses for COVID-19. I'd love to connect with you all. Thank you for listening to me. And like, if you ever see an opportunity to do something like this yourself, please do embrace it, connect with your community, and just kind of be brave, be ambitious, and have at it, try and tackle these large global problems. So thank you very much.